Hello, my name is Richard Little, and I have the pleasure of presenting today to our NENA audience this update on NG9-1 progress in Bell's serving areas. I am privileged to be one of Bell's 911 technical network specialists and co-chair of the CRTC Emergency Services Working Group TIF88, which is coordinating the national NG9-1 trial. Before proceeding, I'd like to take a moment to explain that while this presentation is pre-recorded, please pause it at any time to review the information. Contact details are available at the end of this presentation should you have questions. We will be covering the following topics over the course of this presentation. Bell's NG9-1 network design and operations overview, with specifics on the Bell EZINet and the Bell NG9-1 Control Center. A brief review of where we are with the national NG9-1 trial. And finally, an update on NG9-1 outputs from the CRTC eSWG as relates to PSAPs. There are many activities needed for PSAPs to update to NG9-1 ready systems. Prior to a PSAP signaling their own intention to start, Bell Canada will be evaluating and updating the IPVPN facilities of all currently connected E901 PSAPs to be ready for the NG901 transition. Secondary PSAPs, which currently only have a single IPVPN connection, will be provisioned with an additional circuit to provide the required levels of NG901 resiliency. Bell's 911 Service Manager team will notify PSAPs well in advance of the commencement of any work activities. PSAPs should have selected their vendors and established their project management process prior to signaling to Bell their readiness to onboard to NG911. It is understood that many of the systems being installed at PSAPs during this process may be completely new and thus require extensive implementation testing. PSAPs will be provided ample time to connect and test their NG901 systems prior to the final migration of their PSAPs from E911 to NG901. Unlike the IPVPN migration of ALI several years ago, the production flow of 901 traffic cannot be paralleled. Live 901 calls will have to either be E901 or NG901 for a PSAP, highlighting the need for extensive PSAP testing of their equipment prior to switchover. The 911 authority for a PSAP must execute their NG901 agreement with Bell Canada prior to requesting NG901 interconnection. Once that is complete and a PSAP is ready, they should reach out to their Bell Service Manager to start the process. PSAPs will be provided with an onboarding package including pre-assessment form, the Bell UNI, and other related documents. Over the following weeks, the Service Manager will meet with the PSAP's representatives to explain the pre-assessment form and how the PSAP should populate it. Vendor representation on these calls is permitted. Guidance will be offered on topics such as assignment of contact roles, technical interconnection choices, and timeline planning. Once completed, the pre-assessment form is used by Bell to begin configuration of Bell's systems for the PSAP and to start planning the schedule for onboarding activities and tests. The CRTC's eSWG's TIF85 National Communications Team have developed many documents that PSAPs across Canada can use to help plan for their budgetary, governance, and infrastructure updates. Bell strongly encourages agencies to reference this information as they advance their NG901 strategies. Further guidance on this will be made later in the presentation. PSAPs should also understand that Bell 911 will not certify any particular vendor's product or any suite of product to be compliant with NG901 or the Bell User to Network Interface UNI standard. PSAPs will have time and opportunity during onboarding to validate their i3 CPE implementation before finally migrating to NG911. A significant change for secondary PSAP agencies and backup PSAP facilities is the addition of a second IPVPN circuit, as will be seen in the following slides. This additional equipment is needed for the higher reliability required to support NG901 voice calls over IP networks. PSAPs without existing redundant network facilities on the PSAP side of the demarcation will need to upgrade their networks for NG9-1-1. All PSAPs will need to evaluate their LAN infrastructure to ensure it is ready for the technology, bandwidth, and quality of service requirements of NG9-1-1. Software and hardware upgrades or replacements may be needed to suitably support the expanded requirements. Along with the updates to infrastructure, PSAPs must ensure they have access to adequately skilled technical staffing resources to support this new complex infrastructure. Considerations regarding complex cybersecurity requirements, more complex LAN infrastructure, and a higher requirement of network uptime may play a part in a PSAP's decision whether to keep IT support in-house or outsource. Many PSAPs are expressing interest in hosted or cloud solutions for their i3 call handling systems and other equipment. The TIF-90 hosted model subgroup is currently exploring and discussing this topic and is preparing a report to the CRTC eSWG. The subgroup developing the recommendations is composed of representation from industry, telephone service providers, CRTC, 911 authorities, and PSAPs. The Bell Canada 901 team cannot comment on unapproved deployment models. Any comment to that effect would be speculative at best. We will be compliant with any hosted PSAP model approved by the Commission. The implementation of a hosted solution approved by the Commission will be up to the PSAP selected vendor. The migration of PSAPs from E901 to NG901 will be coordinated, but PSAPs do not need to all transition simultaneously. A transitional element, the Legacy Selective Router Gateway, or LSRG, will seamlessly permit flow of 911 calls between the E911 and NG901 networks. PSAPs will be able to transition on their own schedule, so long as completed prior to the CRTC mandated E901 network decommissioning. Shown here are the general allowed and not allowed functions and uses of the Bell ESINet. A frequent question is if it will be possible to answer admin lines and transfer the call to another PSAP through the ESINet. This question remains under discussion at CRTC eSWG. There is currently no accepted model yet for call promotion. Bell will support the decisions of the Commission in this space. Another common question is with respect to contingency planning and site evacuations. Will it be possible for a PSAP to activate call reroutes themselves in an NG9-1 environment? Essentially, yes, this will be possible via a new NG9-1 process utilizing policy routing rules. These PRRs will be predefined during contingency planning with your Bell Service Manager. New with NG9-1, a PSAP's call handling elements can tell the Bell NGCS the status or state of a PSAP, whether it is overloaded, out of service, down, etc. The status of the PSAP will determine which predefined rule is invoked from the advertised PSAP state out of your i3 call handling equipment. Policy routing rules cannot be changed on the fly by a PSAP. Only rules pre-built by the NG9-1 Control Center based on the input from contingency planning can be applied. How a particular vendor's CPE will trigger the advertisement of a particular state is vendor dependent. For instance, auto detection versus manually enabled. The Bell NG901 interconnection models will look familiar to agencies who made the IPVPN transition for ALI and T901 services a few years ago. Essentially, NG901 traffic will now travel across a previously reserved virtual LAN on the existing IPVPN demarcations. NG901 related IP data flow will flow from callers to their originating network, to the Bell Next Generation Core Service, and to the PSAPs via the Bell IP MPLS network. The highly resilient and diverse IPVPN network is extended with a continued diversity from Bell's provider edge routers to customer edge routers installed at each PSAP. From these demarcation points, the PSAP interconnects to the NG901 network. The ESINet will interact through this interconnection with the border control functional elements of a PSAP's NG911 call handling functional element, that is, a session border controller and firewall. Voice elements, SIP traffic, will be processed by the session border controller, while the PSAP's firewall will control HTTP and HTTPS interactions to and from the PSAP towards the EZINet. The next generation core services or NGCS provider will have no visibility to interactions on the PSAP side of the BCF. PSAPs can and will initiate requests towards different services on the NGCS, originating networks, and other PSAPs. Bell Canada has 3 standardized PSAP network interconnection offerings for NG9-1-1. Several common points to all models exist. No single points of failure for network demarcation and PSAP interfacing device to Bell. The requirement to support the Border Gateway Protocol, also known as BGP, on the peering devices. The requirement to include a full border control function, as defined within the NENA i3 standard. The Canadian implementation of Next Generation 9.1 makes it mandatory for the BCF to include both a session border controller and a firewall. And traffic is delivered in IPv4 and IPv6 in dual stack mode. Interconnection scenario A1 is intended for PSAPs utilizing an active standby firewall configuration as their BGP peering demarcation interface. This configuration requires the firewall cluster to be fronted by a PSAP supplied layer 2 switch to allow the BGP failover to work correctly. Because of the switch fronting the firewalls, this configuration also necessitates the use of bidirectional forwarding detection, also abbreviated as BFD for failure detection. The firewalls in this configuration must transparently pass SIP traffic to the session border controllers behind the firewall. Interconnection scenario B1 is intended for PSAPs with a router pair as their BGP peering demarcation interface. The PSAP LAN network architecture behind the customer routers can vary from this design. This is a reference example. Interconnection scenario C1 is intended for PSAPs with an active-active firewall pair as their BGP peering demarcation interface. The PSAP LAN network architecture behind the customer routers, in this case, can also vary from this design. This is a reference example. The firewalls in this configuration must, again, transparently pass SIP traffic to the session border controllers behind the firewall. Bell Canada, in cooperation with TELUS and SaskTel, are working on a broader scale to interconnect their respective EZINets to each other. This national EZINet will permit native NG9-1 call transfers between PSAPs in any NG9-1 region of Canada, retaining all location information, information about the call, and NG9-1 functionality in the transfer. The 911 Control Center is a 7 by 24-hour support team. We like to refer them as 911 for 911. For PSAPs, they perform various functions. 911 call, trace, and address query for Bell, subscriber information, which requires a password, outage notification, reroutes, and call forwards when PSAPs move to their backup location. As part of improving Bell's resiliency and reliability notification, Bulletin 2020-02, No Answer Email Notification, was released on October 24th, advising of a new procedure for Ontario and Quebec, where PSAPs will receive a no answer email for any missed 911 calls. If IPVPN connectivity has been lost to the primary PSAP, the 911 Control Center technicians will establish a no answer email distribution to the outage notification email address on file that was previously provided to your 911 service manager. Please reach out to your service manager if you have questions, need to change your notification email, or do not want to receive no answer notifications in the event of an outage. In an effort to improve service delivery speed, Bell intends to provide PSAPs with the means to perform carrier resolution via the reverse ALI interface in late Q4 2020. This method will provide the same results as the 911 Control Center would provide. PSAPs using the Impresario service, AQS+P, or an alley query service consumer that supports the reverse alley function will be able to query a telephone number for its originating network provider. For those who have not implemented reverse alley functionality, you are encouraged to review the current E911 interconnection specification in order to improve your emergency response. Your current AQS-SC vendor will be able to assist in evaluating this implementation. In addition to the 8 PSAPs with operational NG9-1 call handling equipment, there are several other agencies working to make themselves trial ready. Several different call handling equipment vendors are participating in the trial. Bell Canada, through its business markets team, are providing solutions to several PSAPs. Please reach out to your Bell 911 service manager or Mr. James Moss to discuss commercially available product options for your PSAP site. Key to completing the CRTC eSWG TIF88 voice trial, PSAPs have been working diligently with their vendors to develop their call handling functionalities. PSAPs have validated the ability to receive NG911 calls with location and transfer those calls to secondary agencies. PSAPs continue to develop functionality to support the Emergency Incident Data Object interface, permitting transfer of call information to secondary agencies. As a national leader in NG9-1-1, in October of 2019, Bell Canada received a letter of recognition from the CRTC for its efforts to date in advancing the NG9-1 trial, and the successful first NG9-1 call received by the COCA PSAP in Quebec with an open source call handling functional element developed in-house. Bell Canada is leading the way in the nationally mandated transition to NG9-1-1 with the following successes. The first wireline NG9-1 test call via the Bell Next Generation Core Service to an NG9-1 trial PSAP in Canada. The first wireless NG9-1 test call via the Bell NGCS to a NG9-1 trial PSAP in Canada. First NG9-1 test call transferred between NG9-1 trial PSAPs in Canada. And the first NG9-1 test call transferred between trial PSAPs in different provinces in Canada. The unprecedented in our time events unfolded by the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in the CRTC announcing in April 2020 a suspension of the originally mandated NG9-1 implementation timelines. In their place, the Commission implemented a 9-month extension to the original launch deadlines and advised of a pending notice of consultation to further review the situation. The dates set out in the extension are as shown here. The Commission also initiated proceedings officially on September 4th with a call for comments on the establishment of new deadlines for Canada's transition to Next Generation 901 via Telecom Notice of Consultation CRTC 2020-326. The Notice of Consultation set out a deadline for submission of interventions of October 19, 2020. Next Generation service providers, originating network carriers, 911 authorities, PSAPs, vendors, and interested parties are invited to submit responses to the Commission. Interventions should address NG901 milestone extension questions as posed within the Notice of Consultation. Only parties that have filed interventions may file a reply to matters raised during the intervention phase. The deadline for submission of replies is November 9th of 2020. Many PSAPs, 911 authorities, and vendors have been made aware of this Notice of Consultation proceeding. If you need assistance in understanding CRTC procedural framing of an intervention, please reach out to your Bell Canada service manager. 8 volunteer trial PSAPs in the Bell 911 footprint have successfully onboarded their NENA i3 call handling functional elements to the Bell EZINet to date. These 8 pioneering PSAPs have each achieved the initial goalpost of having received an i3 SIP NG911 voice wireline call and conferring with the test caller. 3 agencies to date have been successful in transferring an NG911 test call received by their trial equipment to another NG911 trial PSAP. To further advance and commence the test case plan set out in TIF88, At least 2 agencies must implement the suite of functionality as noted on this slide. These functions are critical elements to the complete receipt and transfer of an NG9-1-1 call between 2 911 agencies with an equivalency of E911. As mentioned earlier, the CRTC Emergency Services Working Group, through its TIF 85 National Communications Subgroup, has created a repository of helpful information for all Canadian PSAPs and 911 stakeholders to use as they plan their transition to NG911. This repository on the Bell Flex portal is added to and updated as new information is developed. PSAPs and 911 authorities within the Bell 911 footprint should reach out to their Bell service manager if access assistance is required. For PSAPs and 911 stakeholders outside of the Bell service area, please contact Chris Kellett to request access. The newest document addition is the Geographical Information Systems and Common Addressing FAQ. It's important to note for 911 authorities that moving to GIS is not an immediate requirement to move to NG911. Using a what, why, when, where, who, how flow, this FAQ addresses concerns covering data relations to NG911, funding, timelines, data sources, data aggregation, data ownership, standards, tools, and quality assurance in terms of how GIS impacts you from an NG911 perspective. This brings us to the end of our presentation. If you have any questions or thoughts on the topics covered today, please reach out to us on the Bell 911 team at the email address shown here. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.